The Cape Crusader is missing its colors. Here's your look at McFarlane Toys, DC Multiverse, the Gold Label Collection, Sketch Edition, Hush Batman. As a child, Bruce Wayne watched as his parents were brutally killed in Gotham City's crime alley. Traumatized by their deaths, he devoted his life to becoming the world's greatest weapon against crime, the Batman. To become the ultimate vigilante, the Dark Knight disciplined his mind and body to reach the pinnacle of mental and physical superiority in his relentless pursuit of justice. It's really hard to keep a secret when the Bats is all in black and white. Just before we get a closer look, though, at the Hush Batman Sketch Edition, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that provided this sample we could have a look at. This is a limited run figure with only a copy of 4,800 worldwide. So if you're interested to get this one for yourself, he's available as of right now. The tape measure is going to tell us that this Batman, in fact, is already using the exact same mold as the Hush Batman we looked at before. Don't worry. I'll bring him in for size comparisons in a second. But yeah, being that it's the exact same mold means that it's the exact same height. The figure is going to stand at 7 and a quarter inches in height, or this Batman is 18.5 centimeters tall. So wait, you're telling me this is the same mold as the Hush Batman from before? Yeah, pretty much telling you that. Yeah, it's the exact same figure. The only other thing that is different right now between this one and the way that I removed it from the tray is that he doesn't actually have the closed fist that has the kryptonite ring default. It is one of the included extra hand accessories. We'll show you guys that also in a second. Speaking, though, of trying to remove him from the tray, I had a real struggle. Because his cape is as wide as it is, and the slot to get the cape out is about this wide, you can imagine how difficult it was. Well, you probably even saw for yourself how difficult it was to remove this Batman. In the process of trying to take him out of the tray, I actually broke the slit. Because again, it's only this wide, but the cape is this wide. Well, you can already see how difficult that would be. Now, we do also have a black and white version of the Joker. So if you're looking to display this guy with a Joker, for example, he's not, though, from Hush. This is, though, the Joker from the Three Jokers Batman. We did get a sketch version of the comedian. Of the various offerings, what you get included with Hush Batman is a podium standee that's going to hold, of course, the trading card. On the other side, you're going to get yourself a display stand. And front and center here, you get also as well a pair of batarangs and a pair of interchangeable hands. The first thing that we'll look at is probably the less interesting thing, and not to diminish this at all. Of course, it's always an interesting thing that we get ourselves a display stand. It's also even more interesting this time around because unlike the black logo usually being prominent on the front of the display stands for normal multiverse releases, check this out. Instead, what you get yourself is a white logo to go with the black and white motif. It still has the peg off to the far corner. It can still plug into either one of Batman's boots. It's always really recommended, especially for this mold of Batman, to keep this on the ready. I'm going to keep it in the ready off to the side here. The figure as well comes included with a podium stand. The stand is, in fact, I'm going to bring in the one we got from the Joker, the exact same. Maybe I would say like the one we got from Joker is a little bit of a darker black. I mean, it looks a little bit more blurrier here on Batman. But other than that, it's the exact same standee. It's a different card, granted, and this time around we actually get ourselves a sketched card of the Jim Lee Batman. I'm going to get a closer look at that. That's a nice-looking Batman. It looks like, from what I can see, because there's no colors, obviously, to separate one part of the scene from another, it does look like he's throwing his batarang just off to the side there. Nice-looking card, though. On the back, we're not going to get a read-up this time around. Oh, no. But what we get instead is a certificate of authenticity signed by Todd McFarlane, even though it's not really signed. Obviously, it's just been printed on there. But this is also as well P11 out of 4,800 copies worldwide. When it comes to, by the way, these going into trading card sheets, I don't do that with the standees like this. Either what I end up doing is I put them back in the packaging. Let's hold on. Let me just get the card actually in here first. What I usually do is with the podium standees, I usually put them back into the tray just because I don't decide to display them. Or I just display them with the figures if I like certainly that card. I think this time around this one isn't going to go back to that broken tray because the cape did wonders for it. I might actually just end up displaying it with Batman. It's too good of a card I think to put back in the box. Let's move that off to the side. Figure as well comes included with a pair of swappable hands. So right now he has a closed fist on one side and then he has a batarang holding hand on this side. What he does also get as an alternative is he does also come included with a gestured hand, which would then swap out on this side. And even that is also getting a little bit of the shadowing. So you can see it's on the inside of his hand there. So in between his finger, on his pointer finger and his thumb, you get a little bit of black blotching there as well. He does also get as well the ring hand. Now, I was kind of wondering, though, for this particular release of Batman, if they would have decided to give him just a regular fist hand. Like, for example, do I have it? No, I don't. I was going to say, I have also as well the Black Cowl Batman, which essentially is still Hush Batman. It's just got the open mouth. This got packed, I believe it got packed along with Hush. I don't have the closed fist for that, so that probably wouldn't have not helped. But just to bring back in the Blue Cowled Batman, which is obviously the mold brother to this one. Yeah, this one had, remember, the original Kryptonite ring. So they have still included it, although it's a little harder to make out the green because obviously it's all molded here in white. Exact same ring, though. If you did want to change out the hands, it's just a case. I'm probably not going to swap this hand out because I think the idea of actually having him holding batarangs make a little bit more sense. But let's say for this, we're going to remove this hand on this side. Just pop it from the provided peg. Pretty easy to do. And then you're just going to swap it out with this hand. Careful doing this, by the way. I've not drawn blood, but these spikes on the sides of his gauntlet are pretty pointy. And then once that's swapped out, even though he's still not going to be able to hold a batarang at all with this, I kind of like the idea of displaying him with a gestured hand. Getting him to stand for at least right now. The one other thing I did want to show you guys. And this guy is actually really prone to falling over just because he's got very, very much a heavy cape on the back of his body. He does also get himself a pair of batarangs. The batarangs are just cast here in white, and half of that, looking like something that Two-Face would belong in his collection, there's that black there on the top. The only problem I see with this is the way that he holds the batarangs, and this is a very minor nitpick. If you look at Batman, obviously he's only going to be able to hold it on this side. This other side is a gestured hand, right? So we can rule out this side completely. If we wanted to go with the idea of him holding the batarang on this side, you're likely not going to be displaying it like this, right? Unless Batman's going up to just pummel somebody with hand to hand, he's probably not going to be holding the batarang that way. At least I don't think he would be. I think he would rather throw the batarang this way, right? It's kind of like throwing a frisbee. The thing about it, though, is the moment you do that, the shading that he has on the top, now, this is, again, depending on where you would think the target sunlight would be coming in. If I had it, say, facing this way, you could say, like, well, the sun is hitting it this way, but and that's the reason why there's no shadowing here, and that makes sense why the shadow would be on the inside. But if you look at, though, where the light is hitting Batman, so let's assume for all things that the light's coming down this way, right? Then there really shouldn't be a shadow this way if you have the batarang facing this direction. Sure enough, though, if you have it facing this way, then it makes sense. I would, honestly, though, I mean, again, this is a small thing, very, very small thing. But, you know, what I would have done, though, is I would have made the batarangs completely different colored so that they weren't shadowed in the exact same spot. Sure enough, you could have shadowed it on one side, but then I would have taken the shadow and flipped it around on the opposite side. So if you wanted to have Batman holding the batarang this way, the shadow would line itself with the arm. If you wanted to have it flipped around this way, then you would just swap it up with the other batarang, because it is, again, literally the exact same mold, just colored it in the two different spots, so you could have the two different configurations. Is that really a big deal? It's probably not really a big deal. It's just something, as a reviewer, I just wanted to point out. Just again, because if you wanted to follow the form of the shadow, yeah, okay, we'll stop talking about it. What we'll continue to talk about, though, is how well the shadow is effective on this figure. Well, first of all, I really like this mold, and I've always been a big fan of Hush Batman. You know, I have, though, in the earlier reviews, said that the body is pretty big. If you display it with other Batman or other DC Multiverse figures, then I feel like this is too big of a Batman body. If, though, you display the figure on his own, I think this figure has always been one of the better looking sculpts for Batman. It works really well by evoking that look to Jim Lee's original design, but what I really think that this does better for is by adding this now only shadowing. Essentially, the figure is only really cast in white plastic, so it is really just the same mold as the Blue Cowl Batman, but by stripping away all the colors, it kind of leaves a lot more to the imagination. And I feel like where they was smartly shadowing this guy is really only in the areas that count. You don't necessarily need to shadow everything, so obviously, again, like the sun's probably coming down from this direction. I mean, anybody that knows a little bit more about sunlight, I like to think we're all very knowledgeable about suns, but if you know a little bit more about sunlight, you could probably be even more nitpicking with the idea that maybe like the shadow would be cast in little different areas. But, you know, it hits it where I feel it needs to hit it. So like this side of his face would be completely pale and completely all sun-soaked. And then, of course, you'd have the shadow on this side. I do think that it works really well with this particular mold, and I feel like they were also smart with where they selected the shadowing. It wasn't just a case that they looked at this and thought, okay, we'll put black over here, we'll leave white over here. I mean, everything where, again, you would imagine sun hitting it, other than maybe like these little areas here, I think it's in crucial suggested areas. It's not just randomly selected. The head sculpt looks really good depending on whether you see it from the white side or you spin this around and you see it from the darker side. I think the dark side brings a little bit more when it comes to the personality of the mold. You lose a little bit of it, granted, when you see it from this side, but again, I really think the shadow works really well in this particular figure. Things like his emblem, for example, I mean, obviously they chose just to make this completely dark. I mean, you could say, yeah, maybe this one side be white. I don't think when it comes to a bat emblem, it necessarily has to follow the rules of light and dark colors. I think keeping this all black is a fine idea. I mean, again, when you're looking at things like his belt buckle, you've got the shadow on the one side. His like his pockets, for example, like where the flap would fold down would cast a shadow there. So again, all those areas make sense. And of course, when you flip around the back of the cape, you know, again, like you got one side that's, again, very much a split side, like a two-face, dark on the one side, light on the other. This particular cape, I've always really liked the cape. The trade-off, unfortunately, by liking a cape this size is that it does add a lot more weight on the back of Batman's body. So I would certainly say, as I said earlier, keep the stands on the ready, because you never know when you might need them. Now, for the articulation on this figure, it's going to be essentially the exact same as the Hush Batman. Nothing changes at all because of the exact same mold. Because of that, also, this particular Batman is one of those cases where the head and the neck are all one piece, one appliance. You're not going to have a separate head articulation. You're not going to have a separate neck articulation. The posability is in both parts. So when you're moving the head, everything moves together. Head looks down that low. The head looks up. And you can also move it back and forth. And, of course, always, you can rotate these heads all the way around. The upper torso is going to be on a ball joint. The lower abdomen area is also on a ball joint. And then for the arms hinge out quite freely. There's nothing obstructing them at all, even like the way they got the cape. The cape doesn't cast itself over the shoulders, so there's lots of freedoms for the arms to move completely all the way out. So about a 90-degree angle bend, a complete 90-degree angle bend for those. You can take the arms, rotate them all the way around. No problems with the capes at all. The figure does have a swivel, yes, on his bicep. He also does possess a double hinge on his elbow, and Batman's hands rotate all the way around. When we move down to the lower legs here, the legs are on ratcheted joints. You can see the ratchets on the inside cavity of the thighs. You can take the legs and move forward. You can move them back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh. The figure does still possess a double hinge on the knee. No articulation for the boot. That's all one molded piece. The rest, the continued mold to the calf. But then there's the ankle articulation. You can rock it back and forth, and the figure does have, yes, toe articulation. Still going back to the idea, he does have peg holes in the undersides of his feet. It's most recommended, highly recommended. Use the display stand so you can plug into either one of those peg holes. All in all, though, a nice looking Batman. Still like the look of the mold. It's one of those cases, honestly, though, when it comes to my own collection, I don't tend to ever really put Hush Batman with the rest of my DC Multiverse figures. For the sole reason, really, is that the body has just always been really too big. On its own, though, try not to knock him over, whatever you do. On its own, though, it's a fantastic looking Batman. And, as well, even though I really like the color scheme with the grays and the blues, and hey, why not? There's also as well the black cowl version, if I can get this guy to stand. Yeah, the problem is that the cape is always ever apparent. Getting him to stand, though, for a second. Bringing in the black cowl, hopefully not knock any of these guys over. The capes, don't get them too close to one another, whatever you do. Again, like either obviously the head sculpts are the only thing that's really different about the bookend Batmans on either sides of him. But again, like this mold has always really worked well for the Cape Crusader. Taking then the colors, sucking them off, and then just leaving behind then the white barren plastic, and then adding the shadowing, takes then the mold that I already liked on either side, and it elevates it. It's funny, though, that with the colors now absent, it ends up being a better looking Batman as a result of it. What a fine offering from the folks over at McFarlane Toys. The new Sketch Edition Hush Batman takes all the elements of the original Hush Batman that I liked so much, and by now only approaching it with only just two colors, the primary colors of the white and then the darker accented colors of the black, boy, does it ever get the chance for the mold to shine. This would be also one of those cases where if they haven't already entertained the idea, I think that McFarlane and his team could really take the Hush Batman mold and release it as a statue with the same sort of two-tone color effect. I think it would work really well with this particular design of Batman. From head to toe, it still is essentially just the same mold as the two Hush Batmans we've gotten before. I guess we've now got, three or four molds? Really, even just to branch into like the vampire territory, I think we probably, when it's all said and done, we may even have like 6 or 7 versions of this particular mold. But this one is one that probably sits pretty high on my list as one of my all-time uses of this mold. The cape is always going to still be a problem. The cape is just, it looks good on the back, but it does add a lot of unnecessary weight to the back of Batman's body. Luckily, though, as always the case, McFarlane includes a display stand, so that's never really going to be a problem of Batman toppling over, providing that you've got the figure firmly attached onto the provided peg on the display stand. The only thing I would say, though, as did mention in an earlier end of the review, is that I do kind of wish, though, that the Batarang was colored differently. As I've got it right now, it makes sense if you follow the form of the sunlight hitting Batman. Having the shadow at the top of it works okay if you've got Batman holding it like it looks like he's wanting to stab somebody or key up somebody's car. But if you want to have it spun around so it looks like Batman's actually throwing the Batarang, which I think would be probably the best way Batman would throw a Batarang, he wouldn't throw it with the spike sticking forward, right? He would throw it, so obviously the rounded side is facing forward. If you have it that idea, then I think the shadowing doesn't work necessarily for the Batarang. It's a small little detail. I'm sure I could easily just fix it myself. But I think, though, to include 2 Batarangs, I think would have given them as well an opportunity to shadow the Batarangs in 2 different places. One way to have it then configured this way, and then flipped around the other side, so if you wanted to have the curved side facing forward, you could do that as well. All in all, though, again, other than the little oversight of the Batarang, again, I love the way that this guy is colored. Colored also in a way, too, that it logically makes sense. To look at this, again, if you are somebody that knows a lot about sunlight, I mean, do we all know? I don't think the vampires would know all about sunlight. I guess they would research it, but I mean, first-hand exposure to sunlight would be probably the last thing a vampire would ever want to think about. But I think, though, like, again, the shadowing works well with particular Batman. You can see sort of right away where the sun is hitting his costume, and you can see what other side of his body is basically still left in the shadows. A really nice looking figure. What do you guys, though, think of the Sketch Edition Hush Batman? Is this an instant pickup? What do you guys think of it? Let me know down below. A big thank you once again, of course, to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did come through and provide the sample of the Hush Batman Sketch Edition that we had the chance to have a look at in this review. If you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you'd like to stick around for more, I hope so. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. And of course, just next to that, make sure you turn on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.